Kim Langwa was born on December 24, 1965, in Houston, Texas. She grew up there with her parents and sister, surrounded by friends, and was recognized for her determination from a young age. At 18, Kim gave birth to her daughter, Tiffany. However, shortly after, Tiffany's father left them, forcing Kim to raise her daughter on her own. She moved to a town called Beaumont, hoping to start over and build a stable life for herself and Tiffany. In the beginning, it wasn't easy. Kim often had to balance 3 jobs at once just to make ends meet. Eventually, though, she secured a good position at a local oil refinery, which allowed her more time to focus on her daughter. At that job, Kim also met a man named Ken. The two began dating, and before long, they became engaged, excited to plan their future together. On July 9, 1999, 34-year-old Kim planned to spend the evening at a restaurant with Ken and her 15-year-old daughter, Tiffany. That day, she was supposed to finish her shift at work around 5 p.m., head home, and then go to the restaurant. Around 5:15, Kim called Tiffany to tell her about those plans. She also mentioned that she had a few things to take care of before going home and might be a little late. By 6:30, Kim's shift had ended, but for some reason, she still wasn't home. Ken and Tiffany tried calling her, but she didn't answer, which was very unusual for her. As the hours went by with no sign of Kim, they became increasingly worried. Finally, around 10 p.m., Ken decided to go look for her. He drove along the route Kim would have taken from work to home, checked local stores, and stopped by places she might have gone, but there was no sign of her anywhere. Ken kept searching until he came across Kim's car parked outside a pharmacy, but Kim herself was nowhere to be seen. He looked around the area, hoping to spot her, but there was no trace of her near the pharmacy. At first, Ken thought maybe she had changed her mind about dinner and gone somewhere else. It occurred to him that she might have met up with a friend and decided to leave her car there, even though it didn't make much sense to him. Still, he convinced himself that she was probably fine and went back home. The next morning, Ken drove back to the pharmacy and saw that Kim's car was still sitting in the parking lot. She also hadn't come home overnight and hadn't contacted anyone. At that point, his worry turned into fear. Realizing that something was seriously wrong, Ken decided to call the police. After hearing everything, the officers immediately got to work. Their first step was to examine Kim's car. There were no signs of a struggle or blood inside, but they did find something unsettling. Her cell phone had been left behind. Next, they spoke with Kim's daughter, Tiffany, who had been the last person to talk to her. Tiffany explained that after work, her mom had planned to stop by the home of a man named Terry, with whom she had been in a relationship for 7 years. Even though they had broken up over 6 months earlier, Terry still kept in touch with Kim from time to time. That evening, he had asked her to help him with a repair project. He needed someone to hold a few shelves while he mounted them to the wall. Tiffany said she called Terry on the night her mom disappeared, but he told her that Kim had only stopped by for a few minutes and then left. When the police spoke with Kim's friends, they learned that her relationship with Terry had been anything but smooth. At first, when Kim started dating him, her friends thought he seemed like a decent guy, but that impression didn't last long. Over time, Terry's behavior became increasingly aggressive and controlling. He constantly called Kim, demanding to know where she was and who she was with. He insisted that she obey him and frequently started arguments over the smallest things. Eventually, Kim decided to end the relationship. But breaking up with Terry wasn't easy. He tried to stop her in every way possible. Sometimes he promised to change, and other times he threatened to hurt her if she left him. Despite his efforts, Kim finally managed to walk away. After that, he didn't do anything drastic to get her back, but he continued to stay in contact with her. Kim was afraid to completely cut him off, worrying that if she did, he might harm her or her daughter. From conversations with Kim's friends, police uncovered even darker details about her relationship with Terry. Shortly before their breakup, he had become physically violent, even going so far as to choke her during an argument. After that incident, Kim became genuinely afraid that one day Terry might take things even further. At one point, she confided in her friends, saying that if she ever disappeared, they should start looking for her in Terry's backyard. All this information, combined with the fact that Kim had visited Terry shortly before she vanished, made investigators take a serious look at him as a possible suspect. But when they questioned Terry, he denied any involvement in her disappearance. He told police that Kim had only stopped by for a few minutes to help him mount the shelves and then left. Terry also claimed that about 4 hours after Kim's visit, he went to a local bar and spent the rest of the evening there. This meant Terry had no alibi for the time when Kim went missing, and his motives seemed clear. Investigators obtained a warrant to search his home and combed through his property, but they found nothing, no trace of Kim, no belongings, no blood, nothing to link Terry to her disappearance. Forensic experts also examined Kim's car but didn't find any clues there either. In the end, police couldn't uncover any evidence connecting Terry to her disappearance, or anything that could explain what had happened to Kim. But soon, a new suspect entered the picture. Kim's friends revealed that she had repeatedly complained about her boss, Frank. Not long after she started working for him, Frank began showing her unwanted attention. He openly flirted with her despite being married. As time went on, Frank began writing her love letters, trying to convince her to start a relationship with him. In total, he sent more than 100 letters. The whole situation made Kim uneasy. She was afraid Frank might fire her one day simply because she didn't feel the same way. In fact, Kim had been so uneasy about the situation that she gave all of Frank's letters to her close friends, asking them to hold on to them in case anything ever happened to her. The police reviewed Frank's letters, and their content made it clear that he was completely obsessed with Kim. On top of that, Kim had confided in her friends that Frank would slowly drive past her house several times a day. Sometimes he would even park across the street and just watch her. What made the situation even more bizarre was that Kim's current boyfriend, Ken, also worked at the same company, but that didn't seem to bother Frank at all. Given all this, investigators began seriously considering Frank as a suspect. Kim had vanished shortly after leaving work, and Frank had more than one motive for doing something like that. First, his obsession with her could have escalated to the point where he decided to abduct her. Second, he might have feared that Kim would expose him, either to their employer or to his wife. Either scenario could have caused him serious trouble, giving him a strong reason to silence her. The police decided to question Frank, but he claimed he didn't have any strong feelings for Kim, describing it as nothing more than a fleeting crush that had long since passed. He also denied writing her any letters, despite the fact that investigators had all of them in their possession. Frank's behavior struck the detectives as odd, and they weren't quick to take him at his word. He also claimed to have an alibi, but that raised even more questions. Frank provided a receipt from a store showing that he had been there at 6:56 p.m. However, in theory, he still had enough time to abduct Kim before that. Later that evening, Frank hosted a poker game with some friends who confirmed that he had been with them during that time. But there was still a window of over an hour between the time Kim left work and the time Frank's alibi began, a period for which he had no explanation. Despite their efforts, the police couldn't find any evidence linking Frank to Kim's disappearance, so they shifted their focus to other potential leads. Investigators tried to locate surveillance footage from cameras along Kim's route, from her workplace to Terry's house and then to the parking lot where her car was found, but this effort yielded no results. They also reviewed her phone records and discovered that her last call had been to her daughter, with no further activity afterward. The detectives then concentrated on search efforts, scouring the city and its outskirts. Volunteers joined in, and police made a public appeal, asking anyone with information to come forward. Yet, despite all these efforts, they made no progress. At the same time, more reports about Terry's odd behavior began to surface. Just days after Kim's disappearance, her sister decided to confront him at his home, as both she and the rest of Kim's family strongly suspected him. However, Terry appeared not only indifferent to Kim's fate but went as far as openly mocking her relatives, showing no sign of concern for the missing woman. Another interesting detail came from Terry's employees. He owned a small business, and his office was located on his property, so his workers frequently came by. One of them reported that on the day Kim disappeared, he arrived at Terry's house around 5:50 p.m., and Kim's car was parked outside. However, he didn't see Kim herself. Considering that Kim had left work around 5:15 p.m., this raised serious questions. Terry had claimed that she only stopped by for a few minutes, but his employee's account clearly contradicted that. Soon after, police received another lead. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a tow truck owned by Terry near the parking lot where Kim's car was eventually found. According to them, the tow truck was there around 6:45 p.m., which didn't align with Terry's alibi of being home all evening. Despite these suspicious details, there still wasn't any solid evidence linking Terry to Kim's disappearance. Investigators kept searching for more clues, but ultimately, the case would drag on for years. Kim's family never stopped believing that Terry was responsible for her disappearance, and by then, no one held out hope that she would be found alive. Her sister also told police that Terry continued acting strangely. At one point, he called them and said he was planning to take a polygraph test to clear his name, but then he casually added that he would probably fail it. On top of that, Terry occasionally called the family to ask if they had heard from Kim, as if she had simply gone away for a while instead of vanishing without a trace. And if that wasn't unsettling enough, someone had been calling Kim's relatives for years, only to stay silent on the other end of the line. The family was convinced Terry was behind it, but once again, the police couldn't find anything to tie him to Kim's disappearance. 3 years later, another strange incident involving Terry raised suspicions again. He approached Tiffany on the street and started asking if she had heard anything from her mother. Kim's sister stepped in and told him to leave. In response, Terry said something like, "Aren't you curious about which polygraph question I failed? It was the one where they asked if I killed Kim." Kim's family immediately contacted the police again, but their response was the same. Without solid evidence, they couldn't confirm Terry's involvement. From that point on, the case completely stalled. 8 years later, investigators reopened it and reviewed everything from scratch, but it led nowhere. By then, Terry had stopped cooperating with the authorities and flat-out refused to answer any more questions. This went on for many years until early 2024, when the Oxygen True Crime Documentary team took an interest in Kim's case. They decided to create an episode about her disappearance and launched their own investigation. They interviewed Kim's friends and family before turning their attention to the two main suspects, Frank and Terry. Frank agreed to answer all their questions, but even 25 years after Kim's disappearance, his behavior was still quite unusual. He continued to deny ever pursuing Kim romantically or writing her love letters. Once again, he insisted he had nothing to do with her disappearance. With little progress, the team shifted their focus to Terry. Unlike Frank, Terry refused to speak with them, but they didn't give up and decided to confront him in person. When they arrived at his house, Terry saw them through a window and immediately ran out the back door, apparently trying to escape in his car. Unfortunately for him, the crew blocked his path, leaving Terry no choice but to answer their questions. He claimed he hadn't seen them and wasn't trying to run, even though his actions suggested otherwise. Terry then insisted he had no reason to harm Kim, saying he wasn't upset at all about her leaving him. This directly contradicted what Kim's friends and family had told investigators. She had often mentioned threats and erratic behavior from Terry. Things took an even stranger turn when Terry began contradicting his own original statements. Initially, he told police that Kim had stopped by to help him put up shelves. Now, he claimed she had only come to pick up the rest of her belongings from his house. The contradiction caught the attention of investigators, prompting them to reopen the case. After the documentary aired, prosecutors decided to take a bold step. They prepared to charge Terry with murder. Even though they still lacked solid evidence directly tying him to Kim's disappearance, almost no one doubted his involvement by that point. Investigators hoped that during the trial, new evidence would surface or that the jury would find Terry's suspicious behavior enough to convict him. However, just as prosecutors were finalizing their case, something unexpected happened. A witness came forward after watching the documentary, and their testimony changed everything. According to this individual, Terry had once told him that he had killed his ex-girlfriend and buried her body on his property. With this new information, police obtained a warrant to search Terry's property and arrived with a team of forensic experts. For days, dozens of people combed through the area using advanced ground-penetrating radar. Finally, they made a breakthrough. The radar revealed a section of the concrete floor beneath Terry's bedroom that was about the size of a human body. Oddly, pieces of rebar had been cut out of this spot, even though the rest of the foundation was fully reinforced. Investigators began digging and soon uncovered a blanket buried in the ground. Inside, they found human remains. They were sent to forensic experts, who quickly confirmed what everyone had already suspected: the remains belonged to Kim. Immediately after this discovery, Terry was arrested and charged with murder. With Kim's body now found beneath his bedroom, the prosecution finally had the evidence they needed to secure a conviction. As of now, 67-year-old Terry remains in jail awaiting his trial, which is scheduled for the spring of 2025. In addition to the criminal charges, Kim's daughter has filed a civil lawsuit against him, seeking compensation and aiming to strip Terry of the financial means to fund his defense in the criminal case. It's worth noting that following Terry's arrest, the original investigative team faced heavy criticism. As we know, Kim had told her friends that if she ever went missing, they should look for her on Terry's property, and 25 years later, her body was found exactly where she said it would be. To this day, it's unclear why Terry's house and property weren't thoroughly searched back then. Perhaps investigators did check the yard but found no signs of recent digging. It's also unknown when exactly Terry buried her under his bedroom. It's possible he initially hid her body elsewhere and only moved it under the house after police had completed their initial search. Regardless, Terry now has almost no chance of escaping justice, and Kim's family has finally been able to give her a proper burial. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like and subscribe. We upload new crime case videos every night. Stay tuned, and brace yourself for what's coming next.